What if the most powerful men in American history never truly left the White House? From eerie footsteps to full-bodied apparitions, these former presidents of the United States may still be watching over the nation from beyond the grave. And welcome to Zumundous Podcast, Episode 3. I'm Doolin,
and I'm Keith.
And today we're going to get into the mystery of some dead presidents, not to be confused with the movie Dead Presidents, which is a totally different thing.
Different story altogether.
These
are ghost stories.
There's for our first ghost story on Zumundous. I almost said Zumundo.
Ooh.
But we've been saying Zumundo for a couple of years now.
Yes, so that's facts.
There's actually a lot of stories about presidential ghosts, former United States presidents whose ghosts have appeared in the White House in different places and stuff. And it really kind of begs the question, like, why are there so many presidential ghost stories?
I don't know the answer to that, but there are a bunch.
We can speculate though. Let me ask you this question, Keith. What creates a ghost, essentially? Like, obviously, a spirit dies, a person dies, a spirit stays behind, but typically, like,
there's theories.
So there's theories, like, what does a ghost stay behind? Like, a lot of people say that, like, there was a trauma attached to their death.
Oh, that could be, yeah.
Or maybe they have some unfinished business.
I've always heard unfinished business, stuck in purgatory, those kind of things.
Yeah, but if you think about that, like, who would have more unfinished business than, like, somebody who
than a president,
somebody who led the nation.
Funny.
You know what I mean? Well, I think you dedicated your entire life to, like, to running, the nation.
Well,
essentially
4 years.
Well, 4 years,
right?
4 to 8 years.
Yeah.
Except
for the one guy who did 3 terms, right?
Who did 3 terms?
What are we talking about? In the early 1900s. Didn't somebody do it?
Nobody's ever done 3 terms.
I think somebody did.
That's unconstitutional. That can't happen.
I'm aware of that.
There's been Grover Cleveland did 2 non-consecutive terms,
which is interesting.
But that just Anyways, we're getting hung up on that thing. Let's move forward. And you can Google that if you want while I look up this. But so the significance of this is that the lives of U.S. presidents are filled with immense pressure. Like, you ever see, like,
I was right. It was Roosevelt.
Roosevelt?
Yeah.
What?
I didn't want
Teddy
to say
Roosevelt?
It and be wrong.
He didn't
Franklin.
Franklin Roosevelt?
Yeah.
He did 3 terms?
He won a 3rd term.
No.
Yeah.
When did that happen? How am I just now
when
learning
did that
this?
happen? In 1940. Yeah.
All right, well, that's another conversation for another day. I had
this
no
isn't
idea.
a history podcast yet.
Well, it's just kind of an interesting point. But I bring it up to say this. The lives of presidents are filled with a lot of pressure, power, responsibility, which might explain why they seem to leave a lasting presence even after death.
And ghosts, not to take anything away from this, but ghosts in general, there are famous ghosts, the haunting of a king or somebody of importance, or
Mary, Queen of Scots, who is now better known as Bloody Mary.
The Bloody Mary story. Mm-hmm. Things like that, as opposed to, Frank the Ghost.
He's just chilling. He just walks out. He occasionally walks through the trailer park asking for people for a beer, and then they reach in to get a bush light, and when they turn around, he's gone.
Yeah, that's your actual neighbor, Frank. No, I'm kidding, but yeah, it's interesting, and I think that makes some of it more alluring. And then there's ghosts who have become famous because they're ghosts.
Of course, yeah, and we'll get into that probably in some later episodes and stuff. Because I definitely want to get into some famous hauntings and stuff. But then also I want to talk about, we're going to get into the White House itself as kind of like a beacon.
Oh, it is so much.
The White House is a center of political power, not just for the United States, but like for the center of the free world, really. So there's so much.
It's also like the White House building with a lot of history.
It is an old building with a lot of history. It's an iconic building. Countless important events occurred there, both joyous and tragic. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that makes it kind of fertile ground for ghost stories.
I like the way you put that.
Yeah. So there's the idea that these spirits linger due to unfinished work or unresolved tensions related to their presidency. And I want to start with probably the most famous one, and that's probably Abraham Lincoln, of course. So the
most famous ghost.
the most famous presidential ghost would have to be the ghost of Lincoln.
And if any of this is true, this is probably one of my favorite stories specifically.
Yeah. So I'm going to pose you the question, like, so this guy, Abraham Lincoln, freed the slaves, held a divided nation together, or say got them back together. But does Lincoln's ghost still walk the halls of the White House looking out for the country that he died defending? Quite literally, because he was assassinated for what he did.
I was reading that he has been spotted in the Oval Office, looking out.
Staring out the window, right?
Yeah, staring out the window.
And that would be...
contemplating a country divided.
So it was Grace Coolidge, First Lady Grace Coolidge.
Oh,
okay. The wife of...
She saw him?
Calvin Coolidge. The wife of Calvin Coolidge claims to have seen the ghost of Abraham Lincoln just standing in the Oval Office, staring out the window.
Whoa.
Kind of crazy. Also,
kind of crazy.
Also, President Theodore Roosevelt, he claims to have felt Lincoln's presence in the White House. So, I mean, kind of interesting story there. But
his wife also, Eleanor, right?
Eleanor Roosevelt also?
She used that pink room, I want to say, or the rose room. I might not have that name right, as her study. And she said that she had never seen Lincoln herself, but she felt like a watchful, ominous presence when she'd be in there working late out.
She felt like she just knew it was Lincoln.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's funny because, I mean, Theodore Roosevelt didn't claim to have seen him, but claimed to have felt him, which is kind of funny. I'm like, well, if you didn't see him, if you didn't see the physical form, how did you know it was him?
Well, because everybody's like, oh, it's Lincoln's ghost. And they're like, well, I do feel a little weird at night sometimes.
It could
Maybe,
be.
One of those things.
But one of the most famous stories comes from... This is the best one. Do you want to tell it, or do you want me to tell it?
You can tell it.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the most famous stories comes from Winston Churchill, who was visiting, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was visiting the White House. And while staying at the White House, he reportedly saw Lincoln's ghost. Now, the story goes from Churchill's account that he was staying in a room in the White House, and he was coming out of the bathroom. He had just taken a bath. He was completely naked because, he's just coming out of the bath.
Except for a cigar.
But he had a cigar in his
that
hand.
Makes sense.
And it's just so funny because it's like, well, I don't know if this is true or not. If you know anything about Winston Churchill,
this sounds like it could be.
This sounds like something he would totally do, right?
Yeah.
So as he walked out, he was naked, holding a cigar, sees the ghosts of Abraham Lincoln standing in the room. Clear as day. And without like freaking out, like, oh my God, you're a fucking ghost. Or skipping a beat, he just says, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at a disadvantage."
And with that, I guess the ghost of Lincoln kind of smiled, nodded, and then vanished, like slowly faded away.
It's like, I saw your ding dong, and then he goes away.
Oh, that's too funny. Gotcha. And I mean, the personality of some of these people, whether it's Teddy Roosevelt or Franklin or any of these guys, they talk about the Rough Riders and dudes drinking bourbon and, being cigar smoking, boisterous, big personalities, right?
Sure.
It sounds like something that could have definitely happened, or a reaction. He wasn't scared by it, supposedly. It was totally, oh, wow, I just saw Lincoln's ghost. It's wild,
Well, it's like, and that was like
stride.
That was like something that I had talked about on the old podcast with my own ghost story, which I won't jump into, but it was one of those things where I was like, I definitely experienced something, but I didn't feel scared by it. It was just like I was more welcoming of it. I was like, oh, cool, what's up? What's going on with
like
this?
Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's funny.
So I mean, it's just kind of cool that so that if there's any credence to the stories, whatever, he was just like, oh, hey, what's up, Mr. Lincoln? I know your story very well.
I like how he just obviously there's paintings of these people and stuff, but he just recognizes them right away and he calls him Mr. President 80 years after his
after his death,
whatever,
exactly,
70, whatever it is. But yeah, it's just kind of funny,
There's another story, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, who had come to the White House to say, and this is in 1942. She says to have seen Lincoln's ghost after hearing a knock at her door. So she's in the guest room of the White House.
Okay.
The Queen of the Netherlands. She hears a knock at the door.
Wild.
She goes and she opens the door, and there he is. He's just standing there. His trademark coat and top hat.
She was sleeping in his bedroom.
Oh, was she in the Lincoln Wing?
Yeah.
He was just like, hey, can I come in my room, please? That'd be great. You know, like he didn't say that. I'm just speculating, obviously, as a joke. But but this is the Queen of the Netherlands said that she saw him, like just full bodied apparition,
Open the door.
and there he was. You know,
and he's just there. And did she faint or he disappear?
I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt that might have fainted.
No, this was because she never saw her.
Okay,
Yeah,
never
I think
mind.
it's the Queen. She either fainted or he disappeared.
Okay,
yeah. Which I mean, if you wake up and you see a guy who's 100 years old, absolutely.
You're
not
then,
supposed to be here.
And then and as I just mentioned, Eleanor Roosevelt claims to have felt
the presence,
Lincoln's presence, and that kind of like begs the question, like, well, what makes Lincoln's ghost? Like, maybe why was he there? And then one of the stories surrounding ghost tales is that if there's a lot of emotional trauma surrounding somebody's death, that could create.
Well, he did pass away in the White House.
Wait, he did. Yeah. He was shot, but I think he didn't die. He didn't die right away.
Right. I always was told that he was taken across the street. I've actually been in a Ford's Theater. I haven't been up into that area or anything or taken a tour, but they still do plays there and stuff.
But I mean, you got to think like
a place across the street where everybody says that I believe they say he was either treated and or expired there. But I just read the other day when we were looking this stuff up that he did pass away in the White House, which I don't think I knew that before.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to think, and this guy, this president had more pressure and more stress than probably any other president in history.
I mean, George Washington probably had some stress too.
Prior to becoming president, yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, he had a lot riding on his shoulders and stuff.
War of 1812. I mean, there's a lot of stress in that job in general. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you see how like
I'm not saying one's more or less.
Look at presidents before and after that served 2 terms.
Oh man, that's the thing.
I mean, you see how it ages them. Like
Hair turns
Obama,
white,
George W. Bush. Like you can see like the age in them and stuff. Yeah,
I don't think
absolutely.
you sleep a lot. I don't think you get a lot of sleep.
Yeah, no, maybe not.
Long days.
But I mean, but it would really contribute to the belief that Lincoln had a lot of unfinished business in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to move on from Lincoln.
I've got a George Washington one, and
got a Washington.
You know what?
Yeah,
there's a couple statements here. There's like a Washington Post article
jump to the Washington
just to finish
story.
up the Lincoln thing. They say that he'll come back or be seen a lot when the country feels like it's in need or peril. I don't know how true that is, but and then he just strides up and down the second floor hallway, kind of raps on doors and stuff like that. That's one person's quote. But in 1989, in a Washington Post article, White House curator Rex Scouten said that President Ronald Reagan did comment that his dog would go into any room in the White House except for the Lincoln bedroom. Like he would just stand outside the door and bark. So like you felt the presence there. So I know that's kind of, maybe the dog saw something.
And they say
in
that,
movies, animals are always like kind of in tune to that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But I have one, apparently they saw or have heard of George Washington's ghost as well in Mount Vernon, that it haunts Mount Vernon.
Right. Yeah. So this is outside of the White House a little bit, but it is relevant.
It is,
and stuff like that.
He's the first president.
He is the first president. He's the father of the nation.
So I'm gonna paraphrase this, not get into everybody's personal business, but there was there's a ladies' association and a couple of people stayed the night and they slept in the room, right? Supposedly the room that he passed away on. They started hearing stuff, and they woke to. So it's Mrs. William Beale and a friend of hers spent the night there. At their own request, they're permitted to occupy his bedroom. In the middle of the night, they were awakened by the sputtering of their candle. They had lit one surreptitiously. And were burning it in the middle of a basin of water so that, it would go out if it burned down, not start a fire. They thought they saw, a ghost, right? And it went out without a noise. And then they began to feel alarms. Mrs. Beale commented to her friend, she's like, hey, you're on the side of the bed where Washington died. This sounds like 2 kids almost. Like,
yeah. Like trying to creep somebody
her
out.
Friend's like, no, I'm not. You're on the side. So finally they decided that the question was too doubtful and they stayed up all night and they didn't sleep anymore. And they were kind of scared. But they did say, besides just being scared of every creak and, wind and all the stuff just in general, because now they're freaked out, that they did specifically hear Washington's sword clank distantly in a corner. Like he still was carrying his sword around, and they had
General Washington. Yeah.
Kind of weird. Yeah.
Kind of fun though. I mean, kind of cool story.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So George Washington story.
So here's a less liked president than Lincoln and Washington, and that is the ghost of Andrew Jackson. Now, if you know anything
less
about
liked,
yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a great point in
Fair
history.
enough.
You know what I mean? But Andrew Jackson was particularly known for his. He was very short tempered. Andrew Jackson, and his ghost is said to possibly still roam the halls of the White House, possibly looking for another duel. Now, the funny thing about Andrew Jackson is one of the most notable sightings from him came from Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. Now, the First Lady at the time frequently held seances in the White House and claimed to have heard Jackson's ghost stomping and swearing through the halls. And I don't know if you know anything about the story of Jackson's parrot. Andrew Jackson's parrot, he had a parrot that had to be removed from like rooms and stuff because it would curse and like rant because Jackson was like would just constantly curse and like swear and stuff like that. Yeah, maybe a little bit. But
Andrew Jackson's like 1812, right? War 1812 and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he might have been kind of piratey and having a parrot. That's believable. I mean, pirates defended New Orleans and that whole thing, and it's notorious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to think, and that's only like, maybe about 20 or so years before Lincoln came along into the White House and stuff, maybe a little bit less.
Yeah.
I think Jackson died in like 1845 or something along those lines. So it's just kind of funny.
And swearing.
Yeah. So it's just kind of funny that one of the ghosts or somebody tied to one of the ghosts, Mary Todd Lincoln's, and Mary Todd Lincoln was one of the people that claimed to have seen the ghost of Andrew Jackson. Also, another notable eyewitness to that would be Harry Truman, former President Harry Truman.
Really?
He wrote in letters to his wife that he heard Jackson in the halls of the White House cursing up a storm in the Rose Room. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because Jackson just had such an intense and aggressive personality. And that might explain why his spirit is said to remain agitated. Like, who you are in life is who you are in death.
Maybe.
He was known for holding grudges, and it's theorized that his ghost might still be holding on to the anger that defined a lot of his political career.
That could be.
Also, go ahead. I just want to say. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say it's rumored. It's funny because the White House is not the only place where Jackson's ghost is rumored to have been seen.
Right.
So we have the Hermitage, if I'm saying that correctly, in Nashville, Tennessee, which was Andrew Jackson's former home. It's said to be haunted by his ghost. Now, visitors and staff of this place, because obviously it's more of a museum at this point, they reported hearing unexplained noises such as chains rattling, horses galloping through the hallways, and also
that's wild,
cursing in the hallways.
Yeah.
So, and then
cursing in the hallways.
And then if we go a bit south,
if we hear that at night, we know who it is.
Yeah, we know it's Andrew Jackson, right? The Andrew Jackson Hotel in New Orleans is considered to be one of the most haunted places in New Orleans. There's lots of haunted places in New Orleans, allegedly.
Very much so, yeah.
But it's said to include the home of several ghosts, including that of Andrew Jackson himself.
Right on.
So, yeah, so Andrew Jackson, that's another dead president.
So we're back to the White House for this one.
This
is
go
just
for
a
it.
simple one.
What do you got?
William Henry Harrison, I believe, is the first.
I don't have this one.
President that actually died in office. He haunts the attic, and he was the
attic of the White House.
Yeah, he was the first president that died in the White House, and he haunts the attic, which I thought was kind of weird, unless there was a reason to go up there back then.
Okay,
I don't know. It just seems like an odd place for a president to haunt. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got another one for you.
Okay.
Just a quick note. Thomas Jefferson.
TJ.
Less frequent, but his association with his love for music and
I've read that.
The sense of unresolved tension from his later years kind of make him an intriguing presence. And it's also said that he liked to play the violin.
Yeah.
And
in the Yellow Room.
Yeah. And you can still hear him playing the violin.
That's not creepy at all.
That's not creepy at all.
You got Lincoln knocking on your door. You got a guy cussing up and down the street. You got a dude playing violin.
I got a Borophil guy over here talking about Borophil. No, I will not make out with you.
We've also, we got a guy creeping around the attic.
God, the White House is creepy as shit.
Yeah,
man.
and some of the non-president, just to kind of the White House in general is a spectral college almost. They say that. Abigail Adams used to hang laundry in the East Room because it was the driest, warmest part of the White House, and you can still smell like a scent of lavender or like laundry soap kind of smell there. And if you see her, she'll have her arms kind of out like she's carrying laundry. I'm mimicking this in front of, in front of
he's holding
and,
laundry.
Like she's carrying like a bunch of laundry. There's also some unknown, soldiers.
Well, there's John Quincy Adams as well. We'll get to that.
Let's jump back in there. But just the shout outs to the non-presidential people. There's a couple, David Burns owned the land that the White House is on. Mm-hmm. And he'd been seen or heard around the yellow, like oval room. And then there's Anna Shurat, who bangs on the door of the White House, pleading to see President Andrew Johnson, and she's there to beg for a pardon for her mom, who was a Lincoln assassination conspirator. Mary Shuart. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, Seward. So there's some non-presidential hauntings of the White House specifically, as well as presidential ones. But let's go back to.
Oh, okay. So we'll go with John Adams, America's second president. Mm-hmm. Some say that the ghost of John Adams has been more than seen lingering cold spots throughout the White House. So basically, like it's like a cold, unsettling presence, which is what defines the appearance of John Adams.
We used to walk around and look for those in basements when we were kids. Find a cold spot.
Find a cold spot. Yeah, exactly.
But it's most likely the air conditioner next to
cold spot, but also the sound of footsteps though in the East Room. Where he used to go with his wife. Obviously, you mentioned his wife, and several White House staffers and guests have reported feelings of unease, as if someone is watching them from the shadows of the East Room.
It's amazing that there's so many of these,
Yeah, no.
And that area of the planet in general, like there's a lot of hauntings in Virginia, Maryland. It's it's old, right? It's Virginia was the first in 1600, British settlement. So Jamestown, and that's it's just kind of wild. So there's a lot of American history in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. It's just kind of funny. Like anywhere where there's history, there's ghost stories. I feel like you know what I mean.
Can you imagine like in Europe? There's got to be tons.
You know what I don't know yet is like when are we going to get to the point where we start seing ghosts from the 90s, like the 1990s? you see like some dude in Jinkos and flannels listening to Ace of Base or something. I saw the sign.
That's too funny.
James Madison is another one.
That's good.
James Madison is another one who is, they refer to James Madison as the whispering ghost. So this is one of the fathers of the Constitution, obviously. So the question is, he's still whispering to future presidents? So some think that the ghost of James Madison still lingers, offering advice to the nation's leaders. Now, there are a couple of sightings here. Now, Madison was known for his kind of like as a counterpoint to the ghost of Andrew Jackson.
Okay,
he was a quiet man. He was kind of a quiet guy for James Madison, and his ghost is said to be more of a whispering presence, with some claiming to have heard faint voices or experienced strange whispering sounds in the White House library.
That's kind of creepy.
I don't know. Are we? I feel like I'm doing an ASMR podcast now.
Oh gosh.
No, sorry. But the ghost of James Madison is often associated with his former residences, particularly not just in the White House, but Montpelier in Virginia and the Octagon House in Washington, D.C. So Montpelier is where he lived and died.
Montpelier Mansion, like in Prince George's County?
Sure.
That place is pretty old, too. I wonder if that's the one.
But it's said to be haunted by both James and his wife, Dolly Madison. Visitors and staff have reported seeing apparitions and experiencing unexplained phenomenon in the mansion. Now, the Octagon House, where the Madisons lived temporarily after the British burned the White House
in 1812
during the War of 1812, you got it, is another location of ghostly tales. And Dolly Madison is a popular ghost.
I believe in Montgomery County, or like northern Montgomery County.
Okay.
At the time. It was like a real tiny house. It's still there, and it'll say the White House on it.
The original White House?
Not the original. It just says like it was, the timeline that it was utilized. Yeah.
So, you would ask the question, why Madison? Well, he was involved in crafting the Constitution. He was very passionate in his defense of civil liberties, and that could explain why some of his why his spirit might still linger, watching over the country's legal framework.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I've got a couple of other notable presidential ghosts that isn't quite as involved here, but John Tyler.
Okay.
Some claim that former President Tyler haunts the Blue Room, where he is rumored to have proposed to his second wife.
I've read that.
William Henry Harrison.
Up in the attic.
No, well, yeah. So, but the funny thing about that is, like, you know, William Henry Harrison had the shortest presidency ever.
He was the first person to die in the White House.
Yeah,
first
president. But also he was only 31 days into his presidency.
That's crazy.
He barely served for a month.
He died of pneumonia, which you mentioned earlier. He may have caught prior to even taking office. Right?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, well, he actually had a cold on his inauguration day.
Okay,
and so as he went to bed with the cold at the end of inauguration day, and then it just developed into a case of pneumonia from there, and died.
Apparently his schedule was pretty nuts. So they're constantly doing social things and going places, making speeches, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So he kind of ran himself into massive fatigue. On top of being sick, so that escalates.
That's crazy.
That's pretty wild.
Well, so for that reason, it's considered that his ghost lives on. But we have some theories and speculation here. So I'll pose this question. Are these encounters the results of vivid imaginations, or is there something deeper tying these powerful political figures to the land that they once governed?
I think it could be both.
Both things could be true, yeah.
I mean, you think about, let's say you get the opportunity to stay there, which we probably never will, but we're a guest in the White House, we're staying there. You're thinking about all the stuff that's happened there, especially if you're from a different time, somebody from 1900 remembers things different than we remember them. So you're going to think about all these, presidents and all the people who live there and people who work there and stuff. So maybe, you have kind of a vivid dream, your imagination runs wild with itself and you think you hear something. You ever go to sleep and you think you hear something loud and you wake up, you're like, oh, that was nothing,
Yeah.
I imagine that. Or like a dream, you can hear things in dreams. You talk to people, right? Stuff like that. I think there's definitely that could be part of it. Right?
I think
just because you're in that environment,
and I think there might be something to that. We're typically, even though we're doing like a podcast on this stuff, we're both we're not non-believers, but we're a little skeptical with some of this stuff. But I will give some credence to the idea that the stress, the power, and the emotional toll of living in the White House and having an entire nation on your shoulders might leave a spiritual imprint on the place where you spend your final days. And then in terms of just spiritual beliefs, these sightings could be a reflection of belief in the powerful figures remaining tied to important places in history, especially given the historical significance of the roles they once had. And we see it reflected in pop culture now. Presidents have been referenced, presidential ghosts have been referenced in various movies, television shows, books, kind of keeping the legend alive, particularly in the 2013 film, The Conjuring. That movie references the White House as haunted, particularly by Lincoln's ghost. So the story is kind of carried over into pop culture.
Well
you know
known.
what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty well known.
Absolutely. And then, of course, if you go to Washington, D.C., or a lot of these places where you have a lot of history, a lot of these presidential sites now, as you would see in most places, include ghost tours that highlight the supernatural stories.
They do, and there's even on field trips as a kid, that stuff would come up.
Oh, sure.
When you go to some place like that, they'd be like, "Ooh, and this place is haunted, supposedly by so and so."
Yeah.
Not that was a factoid for the day, but that's the thing that everybody grabbed onto. Ooh, we're in a spooky place. Yeah, this is cool. Yeah.
Well, my final thoughts on this is, whether or not the spirits are real or the result of imagination, one thing is for certain: America's history is so rich and intense that it's almost fitting that some of our greatest leaders might still be watching over us even in death. And if you have some insight on that, send us an email, zumundo@outlook.com, and we'd love to hear what you have to say on our presidential ghosts.
I'd love to hear about a sighting. That would be neat.
Yeah, that would be cool, man.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody out there's served in the White House and
had
some of it. Absolutely. So, but that's gonna be it for today, man. For Zumundous, I'm Doolin,
and I'm Keith,
and we'll see you next week. Have a Zumundous week, everybody.
Yeah.